The review of GLA Group housing delivery by Lord Kerslake made a series of recommendations to support a more unified, coherent and streamlined housing delivery across Transport for London, London Legacy Development Corporation, Old Oak and Park Royal Development Corporation, London Fire Brigade and the Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime. The review highlighted the unevenness of delivery across the group. Lyn Garner, currently CEO of LLDC, has been appointed to lead the group to oversee programme and performance, including managing an overall pipeline of land and housing opportunities. What are we talking about here in terms of the number of homes that they can deliver?
So the Mayor is expecting to get somewhere in the order of 23 to 25,000 starts in this year. It's hugely ambitious, and it should be ambitious, but it's at a time of huge uncertainty. So will we be able to do more in this year and next year following the Kerslake review? I think my first priority is to make sure that we get close to delivering what we said we would deliver, given what we're dealing with. You know, UK and Brexit, pandemic, it's all out there, rising construction costs. So let's see what we can get secured within the pipeline to begin with, I think.
All the members of the group, and they're quite a disparate group, aren't they, really? They've signed an agreement to deliver 50% affordable, which obviously the Mayor insists on, sustainable development, as one would expect. But what are the other sort of benefits you see of collaboration?
I think there are pretty huge benefits around talent management. I'm particularly anxious about this because of LLDC starting to wind down over the next couple of years and OPDC starting to wind up. There's a real risk that we leak an awful lot of talent from LLDC. And of course, talent at the moment is really thin on the ground. So we're wanting to look at that as a key work stream. I want to be able to offer easy opportunities to transfer within the GLA family for the people who work here. All of the organisations have completely different terms and conditions. They're all separate statutory organisations with their own HR functions and so on. So actually that's a pretty big strand of work, I think, to succeed in that space. And I only have a short period of time before some of my development projects start to wind up. So East Bank starts to be handed over next year. Huge construction project. We have huge experience and lots of talent, and I really want to capture those opportunities. That's the important one. I think we need a very clear view of the pipeline. Bob mentions this in his report, actually. We do have the Homes for Londoners Board, but what the Homes for Londoners Board is not able to do is really drill down into the risks and opportunities within the high level numbers. And also what they're not doing is looking forward at new opportunities to bring land into the mix. What they're tending to do is just monitor what's in development already. Whereas I think we want to get into a conversation about what are the future opportunities actually, and how are there opportunities to collaborate and do things perhaps slightly differently with the programme, working with GLA colleagues in a more joined up way, which is really what the report is all about actually.
Lord Kerslake talked about the different approaches to development and disposals among the members of the group. What do you see as the issues there, and what can you do to sort them out?
Generally speaking, GLAP are using LDP2 and development agreements to get their land away. They don't have very much in the way of joint ventures. There are the joint ventures down in East London, Royal Docks and so on, but they're not very many at all. They're tending to be development agreements. TfL is very much a horses for courses piece, so they've got a big joint venture with Granger for private rented housing. They've got a number of development agreements. They don't achieve planning before they dispose to a development agreement, whereas we in LLDC do, GLAP don't. MOPAC goes for straight disposals of their land, and they're focused on achieving the best consideration, as Bob points out in his report. for that land, and there's a tension there, I think, with the 50% affordable housing. I'm really hopeful that now we've got MOPAC and the London Fire Brigade signing up to that policy statement, that we can really drive 50% affordable housing from those organisations. I have to say though, I've yet to sit down with those two organisations and just have a conversation about what's coming forward. MOPAC are just about to complete a new estate strategy, so the time is about right. I don't think actually that the opportunities are huge. One of the bigger ones was Hendon, which was done in partnership with GLAB and did achieve really high numbers of affordable housing. So there has been success in the past, and see no reason why we can't exploit that in the future actually.
He also talks about group members taking on the wider view of the developer role to include land assembly, compulsory purchase and joint ventures, and suggests that should happen now. Is that feasible in terms of sort of skills and resources available?
Well, I think it is, because often different sites demand different approaches, don't they? Size of the site, what are we dealing with? Are we dealing with a site that's 600 to 1,000 homes and therefore more of a placemaking project? Are we dealing with a site that's 100 or 200 homes? Different approach. LDP maybe smaller sites, small builders, frameworks. We have those. I think it's working okay from what I've seen so far. What I don't think is necessarily happening is sharing of expertise in those various areas. A good example is LLDC. We've decided to get into 2 big joint ventures, but we're not necessarily sharing our procurement journey with TfL, who've been on that journey a couple of times. You remember when they first started their property development journey around stations, they launched a framework for joint ventures. Now they've come through that and learned a lot of lessons. But what I think is happening in the family is that the best practice and the lessons are not being shared across the group as effectively as they could be. So I'm hoping with bringing those leaders together in a collaborative way, we'll get more of that going. It will take a while, to people's feet under the table and so on. They've been doing their own thing. But we ought to get much more bang for our buck through that process, I think.
Because TfL had a very good design guide as well, didn't they, for all their development?
Yes, and actually we sat down with them yesterday, myself and a couple of colleagues, and I'm hugely impressed with the work they're doing. They've learned an awful lot as they've started their journey, but they've got quite a number of sites in pipeline now that I think probably will get on site this year and start to make a difference in the numbers.
Yes, because they haven't quite hit the targets that the mayor set them in terms of 10,000 homes by 2022. Have they? It's now getting going, is it?
Yes, yeah, it really is getting going, and they've learned some lessons along the way around just how long it takes to get schemes through planning. Who's leading the planning conversation? Is it TfL or is it the developer that they've brought on board? And they've learned some lessons there. No doubt they've learned a lot of lessons about the politics in the various boroughs, because it's different everywhere and you have to go through that journey, don't you? But they've started to make a whole set of connections with borough officers at senior levels, and I think that should start to become a smoother journey for them. They've learnt an awful lot. So they're thinking about having more of an internal planning consultancy in the future, and even taking some schemes through planning themselves before handing them over to developers. It'll be a bespoke approach, site by site, horses for courses, so to speak. But yeah, I was quite impressed with what they were showing me yesterday. There's a little bit of drilling down into the numbers in terms of making sure that we're properly highlighting risks to the mayor, particularly in today's environment, because we are dealing with a whole load more new risks than we were not so long ago. Some of their sites are really very marginal, so they're producing a lot of affordable housing on marginal sites, and that's going to be tricky, getting that through. But I think across a portfolio approach, they ought to do quite well. They set themselves the 10,000 target, actually, rather than the mayor setting it. They were bullish back in the day and thought they could achieve 10,000. They've got a way to go, but I think they're hopeful of getting around 2,500 starts this year. It looks fairly robust at the moment. It needs a little bit of unpicking just to be sure about it.
That's good. So extending the ambition to develop more homes will require more development finance, and also taking a view of borrowing and risk, which public sector isn't always very comfortable with. So how does that sit now in a time, as you mentioned, that inflation, increasing interest rates, and general sort of global instability?
Yeah, a couple of things to say about this. Particularly in the joint venture piece. I've always been an advocate of joint ventures because I think it brings the public and private sector together really well, exploiting private sector talent and allowing the public sector to sometimes maybe take a deferred receipt, sit in the background, bring in potential borrowing and so on at low level rates. And so it seems to me a good thing to do. The risks and rewards are shared between the private and the public sector. One can make decisions around the decision table about bringing forward affordable housing sooner if it makes sense in funding cycles, but also in times of uncertainty. And we saw this in 2007-8, whereby public authorities were able to step into the breach at a time when the banks were in tremendous difficulty and development finance was difficult to get hold of. We saw it on a number of schemes where actually Housing and Land at the GLA stepped in to help schemes. So I'm a real advocate of the joint venture model, particularly in times of uncertainty, where I think the public sector can ride the storm for much longer. Now, it does mean that we have to do more borrowing and put more finance in. I've started a conversation with the Director of Finance at the GLA. There's definitely an appetite to look at this, and he started a piece of work with his Treasury Management colleagues on what the art of the possible might be, and we're hoping to talk to the Mayor about that this summer in terms of the next budget round, because we'll need to start putting markers down for additional finance if that's going to be required.
Lord Kerslake also set out how the proposals for a City Hall developer could be delivered, and he was suggesting in 2 stages. Why is that the case?
It's interesting, this, isn't it? I think we already have a City Hall developer. I think it's called GLA, and we have a number of development entities in the family who are delivering. LLDC, OPDC, TfL, delivering huge amounts actually to this agenda. So we have a developer function. The question really is about direct delivery. And my concern about that right now would be that huge uncertainty, and it would be the lack of talent in the market, particularly around construction and rising construction costs and so on, availability of materials. I think taking all the risks in direct delivery is a big step to make, and that's why I say that I'm more of an advocate of a step-by-step approach towards the joint venture type model for larger sites than direct delivery at the minute. And for me, I think myself and the Deputy Mayor really need to see a very strong business plan that sets out why direct delivery could work for the GLA. I'd want to really see that. I think the biggest number of homes I've ever built, Peter, in a direct delivery model was at Haringey. I think I managed to get about 32 homes away. It was a very difficult process. It was very costly. We were starting from scratch, and there are huge risks, especially with larger programmes. So anything that we do in the early days will be pilot, but I really want to see the business case for this before we go forward and make sure that the Mayor's wedded to that going forward. So early days in my own mind, actually.
Lyn Garner, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.